The year is 2347. Humanity has evolved beyond the constraints of its single blue world, spreading across dozens of star systems in a silent expansion that took less than 3 centuries. They did not ask for permission. They did not send envoys bearing olive branches or white flags. They simply moved outward, claiming territory in the void with the same quiet determination that once drove their ancestors across untamed continents. The Galactic Dominion, an ancient empire spanning 12,000 star systems and comprised of over 300 sentient species, did not notice at first. How could they? Humanity was young, barely a cosmic infant. Their technology was primitive by Dominion standards. Their ships were crude, their weapons antiquated, their understanding of faster-than-light travel still in its infancy. They were supposed to be decades away from even making contact with the greater galaxy. But humanity never asked what they were supposed to do. They simply did what they had always done. They adapted, they innovated, and they pressed forward. The first true encounter happened at the edges of what the Dominion called the Cress Expanse, a buffer zone between civilized space and the lawless territories beyond. A human exploratory vessel, the UES Endeavour, stumbled upon a Dominion patrol station orbiting a barren moon. Commander Jacob Pierce, a grizzled veteran of Earth's colonial expansion wars, made first contact with Sublegate Thuron Velarix, a proud officer of the Cathari species who had spent 2 centuries maintaining order in this forgotten corner of space. The exchange was cordial at first. Velarix, curious about these newcomers, offered the standard warnings and protocols. This region of space was under Dominion jurisdiction. All travel beyond this point required proper authorization. Humanity would need to submit to the Dominion Council, prove their worth, and wait for formal acceptance into galactic society, a process that typically took between 50 and 200 standard years. Commander Pierce listened patiently, then gave his response. Humanity would be continuing its expansion. They would welcome diplomatic relations with the Dominion. They would respect existing colonies and inhabited systems, but they would not be stopping. Velarix was stunned. In 12,000 years of Dominion history, no species had ever simply refused the established order. He delivered a final ultimatum: leave Dominion space immediately or face consequences. Pierce politely declined, transmitted humanity's proposed boundaries for coexistence, and continued on his mission. The UES Endeavour vanished into the darkness, leaving Velarix to send a warning that would echo across the Dominion. 2 months after the encounter, the Dominion High Council convened on Archanis Prime, the administrative heart of their empire. The council chamber was a marvel of ancient architecture, carved from a single massive crystal that had stood for millennia. Around the circular table sat representatives of the Dominion's most influential species, the Cathari with their serpentine grace, the massive stone like Vrex, the ethereal Tees-Hal, and dozens of others. High Arbiter Zephon, a Tees-Hal who had guided the Dominion for over 4 centuries, called the session to order. The matter at hand, humanity's unprecedented defiance. Senator Krell, a Vrex whose species had been part of the Dominion since its founding, advocated for immediate military action. This was not merely disobedience, it was an existential threat to everything the Dominion represented. If humanity was allowed to ignore the ancient laws, what would stop other species from doing the same? But other voices urged caution. Admiral Helena Drake, the first human ever to address the council, having been captured during a skirmish and subsequently exchanged, stood before them. She explained humanity's perspective with a calm that bordered on audacity. Her people had explored the void for 3 centuries, claiming uninhabited systems, building colonies on lifeless worlds. They had not invaded anyone. They had not attacked unprovoked. They had simply existed in the spaces between the Dominion's borders. When asked why humanity refused to submit to Dominion authority, Drake's answer was simple: because submission had never been in their nature. Humanity had spent its entire history fighting against those who would control them. They had overthrown tyrants, broken empires, and fought wars of independence across countless worlds. They did not kneel, even to empires that spanned the stars. The council was divided. Half believed humanity's defiance warranted a swift, overwhelming response. The other half argued for patience, suggesting that perhaps the Dominion's ancient laws needed reevaluation. High Arbiter Zephon made the decision. The Dominion would send a punitive fleet to the human frontier, not to destroy, but to demonstrate power. Humanity would learn the cost of defiance, and then, hopefully, they would see reason. The Dominion assembled a fleet of 300 warships, led by War Marshal Tethys, a Cathari who had never lost a battle. The fleet was massive, equipped with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had turned aside asteroid impacts. They entered human space at the Proxima Centauri system, where humanity maintained one of its oldest colonies. Governor Martin Cole received the Dominion's ultimatum: surrender the system, submit to Dominion authority, or be removed by force. Cole, a former military strategist who had helped plan Earth's colonial expansion, gave his response over open channels so that every human in the system could hear. Humanity would not surrender. If the Dominion wanted Proxima, they would have to take it. The Battle of Proxima Centauri lasted 18 hours. Humanity's defense fleet numbered only 47 ships, each one smaller and less advanced than the Dominion warships. But the humans fought with a ferocity that shocked the invaders. They employed tactics the Dominion had never encountered: ramming maneuvers at relativistic speeds, coordinated suicide runs that targeted command ships, and something the Dominion found particularly disturbing: a complete disregard for self-preservation when it meant protecting their colony. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes commanded the destroyer HMS Defiant. When her ship's weapons were disabled and her engines failing, she did not retreat. Instead, she plotted a collision course with the Dominion flagship, accelerating to 40% light speed. Her final transmission, broadcast across all channels, became legendary: "I regret that I have but one ship to give for my species." The Defiant struck the flagship's shield with such force that the resulting explosion could be seen from the colony's surface. The flagship survived, but War Marshal Tethys was shaken. In 3 centuries of warfare, he had never witnessed such deliberate self-sacrifice. The humans were not merely fighting, they were embracing death as a weapon. The Dominion won the battle, but the cost was staggering. They lost 93 ships, nearly a third of their fleet. Thousands of crew members died, many of them veterans who had served for centuries. The colony itself had been evacuated before the battle, the population relocated through an underground network of tunnels that the Dominion never detected. When Dominion troops finally landed on the planet's surface, they found empty cities rigged with explosives and automated defenses that continued fighting for days. Tethys sent his report to the High Council. Proxima Centauri was under Dominion control, but it was a hollow victory. Humanity had suffered a tactical defeat but achieved a strategic success. They had proven that invading human space would be costly beyond any reasonable calculation, and more disturbing, they had shown that they would never stop resisting. The destruction of Proxima Centauri sent shockwaves through human space. The United Earth Systems, humanity's governing body, held an emergency session on Mars. President Victor Laurent addressed the assembled representatives from 47 colonial systems. The message was clear: the Dominion had declared war, even if they refused to call it that. Humanity's response would not be submission, it would be total mobilization. Within weeks, every human system began converting civilian infrastructure to military production. Shipyards that once built colony transports now produced warships. Mining colonies that extracted resources for trade now fed the war machine. Research stations that pursued theoretical physics turned their attention to weapons development. Humanity, fractured across dozens of worlds with their own governments and cultures, unified with a speed that terrified Dominion observers. Dr. Evelyn Park, head of the Advanced Weapons Research Division on Luna, made a breakthrough that would change the war. Her team developed what they called the Helios Cannon, a directed energy weapon that used contained fusion reactions to generate beams of such intensity that they could penetrate even Dominion shields. The first prototype was mounted on the battleship UES Retribution, commanded by Captain Nathan Cross, a young officer who had lost his entire family at Proxima. The Dominion, meanwhile, struggled to understand their new enemy. Intelligence Officer Lissa Kai, a Hal who specialized in xenopsychology, compiled extensive reports on human behavior. What she discovered troubled the High Council. Humanity's aggression was not born from territorialism or resource competition, the usual drivers of conflict in galactic society. Instead, it stemmed from something far more dangerous, an absolute refusal to accept external authority over their destiny. Kai's reports detailed humanity's history, a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times through nuclear weapons, environmental collapse, and global warfare. Yet each time, they had pulled back from the brink and rebuilt. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and genocides. They had gone from primitive tool users to spacefaring civilization in a geological eye blink. And most concerning of all, they had developed cultural narratives that glorified resistance against impossible odds. The second major engagement occurred at the Kepler 442 system, a strategic junction that connected human space to the Dominion's outer territories. The Dominion sent a smaller fleet of 120 ships, commanded by Admiral Vorthresh, a Vrex known for his conservative tactics and methodical approach. He expected a repeat of Proxima, fierce resistance followed by eventual human defeat. What he encountered instead was a transformed enemy. The human defense fleet was larger, better coordinated, and equipped with new weapons that cut through Dominion shields like paper. The battle turned into a massacre, but this time it was Dominion ships that burned. Captain Cross and the Retribution led the assault, the Helios cannon tearing through enemy formations with devastating efficiency. But the humans revealed another innovation that day: autonomous combat drones. Small, fast, and expendable, these drones swarmed Dominion ships by the thousands, overwhelming their defenses through sheer numbers. Each drone carried a small nuclear charge. When they reached their targets, they detonated against hulls, shields, and weapon arrays. Individually, they were no threat, but deployed in massive swarms, they were devastating. Admiral Vorthresh retreated after losing 70% of his fleet. His report to the High Council was grim. Humanity had not merely matched Dominion technology, they had surpassed it in key areas. More concerning, they had done so in mere months. The rate of human innovation was unprecedented. If the war continued, the Dominion's technological advantage would evaporate entirely. The High Council faced a dilemma. Senator Krell advocated for total war. The commitment of the Dominion's full military might to crush humanity before they became an existential threat. But others argued this approach would be catastrophic. The Dominion's military was vast, but it was also spread across 12,000 systems. Pulling forces to fight humanity would leave other borders vulnerable, and there was no guarantee of victory, only certainty of massive casualties. High Arbiter Zephon proposed a different approach: negotiation. Not surrender, not submission, but genuine diplomatic engagement. Humanity had proven they could not be easily defeated. Perhaps it was time to find a way to coexist. The Council, divided and uncertain, agreed to send an emissary. Ambassador Kelvin Shaw represented humanity at the first official peace talks, held aboard a neutral station at the border between human and Dominion space. Shaw was an unusual choice, a former soldier turned diplomat who had seen combat at Proxima and lost his right arm in the battle. He wore a mechanical prosthetic as a reminder of the war's cost. The Dominion sent emissary Talvreen, a Cathari diplomat with centuries of experience negotiating treaties and resolving conflicts. Talvreen began with the standard Dominion position: humanity must accept Dominion sovereignty, submit to its laws, and integrate into the greater galactic community under established protocols. Shaw's response was polite but firm. Humanity would never accept subjugation, regardless of how it was framed. However, they were willing to discuss mutual recognition of territories, trade agreements, and joint security arrangements. They would respect Dominion space if the Dominion respected theirs. They would cooperate on matters of mutual interest, but they would remain sovereign. The negotiation stalled almost immediately. The concept of equal sovereignty was foreign to the Dominion. For 12,000 years, there had been only one power structure, the Dominion and those who served within it. To grant humanity equal status would be to fundamentally alter the galactic order. It would invite other species to demand the same recognition. While diplomats talked, both sides continued military preparations. Humanity expanded its fleet, now numbering over 800 warships. They fortified border systems with defensive platforms, minefields, and orbital weapons arrays. Every human system became a potential fortress, every colony a stronghold. They were preparing not just for war, but for a conflict that might last generations. Colonel Sarah Mitchell commanded the garrison at New Chicago, a major colony world that lay directly in the path of any Dominion advance. Her forces included not just regular military units, but civilian militias, volunteers who trained in their spare time while maintaining their normal lives. A teacher by day, a combat pilot by night, a farmer who could assemble a plasma rifle blindfolded, an engineer who designed defensive fortifications in her workshop. This was humanity's true strength, not their technology or their tactics, but their absolute commitment. Every human, civilian, or soldier understood what was at stake. They had seen what happened at Proxima. They knew the Dominion would not stop with one system. If they did not fight, if they did not resist, they would lose everything that made them human: their freedom, their autonomy, their right to determine their own future. The Dominion, observing this mobilization, grew increasingly concerned. War Marshal Tethys, now commanding the entire Dominion military, produced a strategic assessment that shocked the High Council. A full-scale invasion of human space would require at least 5,000 warships and would likely result in casualties exceeding 1 million. Even with those forces, victory was not guaranteed. Humans would fight for every system, every planet, every orbital station. They would employ asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and scorched earth policies. The war could last decades and cost trillions of credits, but the alternative was equally troubling. If the Dominion backed down, if they recognized humanity as equals, it would signal weakness. Other species would demand independence. The careful balance that had maintained galactic peace for millennia would collapse. The Dominion faced an impossible choice: fight a war it might not win, or accept changes that could destroy the empire from within. The stalemate was broken by an unexpected event. A new threat emerged from the galactic rim: the corruption, an ancient enemy that the Dominion had fought and barely defeated 3,000 years ago. Massive biomechanical entities that consumed entire star systems, converting all organic and inorganic matter into more of themselves. Scouts reported that the corruption had returned, and it was moving toward inhabited space. The High Council faced a crisis. Fighting the corruption would require every available warship, every resource, every tactical advantage. But half their military was positioned against humanity, locked in a cold war that neither side could afford to lose. High Arbiter Zephon made an unprecedented decision. He would ask humanity for help. The message arrived at Earth aboard an automated courier, marked with the highest diplomatic priority. High Arbiter Zephon addressed President Laurent directly, explaining the threat and making an offer. If humanity would fight alongside the Dominion against the corruption, the Dominion would recognize human sovereignty. Not as subjects, not as protectorates, but as equals. It would be a formal treaty, binding and permanent. The offer divided humanity. Many argued that this was a trap, that the Dominion would turn on them once the corruption was defeated. Others saw it as an opportunity, a chance to secure everything they had fought for without further bloodshed. President Laurent called for a vote among all colonial representatives. The debate lasted for 3 days. In the end, the vote passed by a narrow margin. Humanity would join the fight, but not out of trust in the Dominion. They would fight because the corruption threatened everything, including human space. And they would fight with their fleet fully armed, their systems fully fortified, ready to turn their weapons on the Dominion the moment the treaty was violated. The combined fleet assembled at the Dominion's fortress world of Bastion Prime. 8,000 warships from 300 species, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. The human contingent, led by Admiral Helena Drake, numbered 1,200 ships, representing 15% of the total force. They maintained their own command structure, their own tactics, and their own rules of engagement. The first battle against the corruption occurred at the Void's Edge, a cluster of dead systems on the galactic rim. The enemy emerged from hyperspace in massive swarms, thousands of bioships ranging from fighter-sized drones to moon-sized leviathans. They attacked without communication, without warning, without mercy. Their weapons were unlike anything the Dominion had faced. Acids that ate through hulls, viruses that corrupted ship systems, and tendrils that reached across space to tear vessels apart. The Dominion forces fought with practiced coordination, their formations perfect, their tactics refined over millennia. But the corruption was adaptive, evolving defenses against Dominion weapons in real time. Ships that fought effectively one moment found their weapons useless the next. The battle began to turn against the defenders. Then the human fleet arrived. Admiral Drake did not follow Dominion tactics. Instead, she deployed her forces in loose formations, constantly shifting positions, refusing to establish predictable patterns. The Helios cannons proved devastating against corruption bio-armor, cutting through their adaptive defenses before they could adjust. The autonomous drones, upgraded with new weapons, swarmed the enemy in numbers that matched their own. But humanity's true contribution was something the Dominion had never considered: psychological warfare. Corruption entities operated through a hive intelligence, coordinating across vast distances. Human scientists, led by Dr. Evelyn Park, developed a weapon that targeted this network. Broadcasting chaotic signals on specific frequencies, they created interference in the hive mind, causing confusion and disarray among corruption forces. The battle turned. Corruption forces, unable to coordinate effectively, began to retreat. The combined fleet pursued, destroying enemy ships by the hundreds. It was humanity's first major victory alongside the Dominion, and it proved something both sides had suspected. Together, they were unstoppable. The war against the corruption lasted 8 months. Battle after battle, system after system, the Allied fleet pushed the enemy back toward the galactic rim. Human tactics complemented Dominion strategy. Human innovation solved problems that had stymied Dominion scientists for centuries. And human stubbornness, that refusal to accept defeat, inspired allies who had begun to lose hope. Captain Nathan Cross, commanding the Retribution, distinguished himself in the final battle at the corruption's primary hive world. Leading a strike force of human and Cathari ships, he penetrated the enemy's inner defenses and destroyed the central intelligence node. The victory cost him his life, his ship consumed by the hive's death throes, but it ended the war. The Allies returned to Dominion space victorious but changed. War Marshal Tethys, who had once sought to destroy humanity, now advocated for the treaty's ratification. He had fought beside humans, seen their courage, and understood that they were not an enemy to be defeated but an ally to be valued. The Treaty of Concordance was signed on Archanis Prime in a ceremony attended by representatives from every member species of the Dominion and every colonial system of humanity. High Arbiter Zephon and President Laurent affixed their signatures to a document that fundamentally altered the galactic order. Humanity was recognized as a sovereign power, equal to the Dominion in all matters of law and diplomacy. Human space would remain independent, governed by human laws and defended by human forces. In exchange, humanity agreed to respect Dominion territory, honor existing treaties, and participate in the Galactic Council as full members. But the treaty went further. It established new protocols for integrating emerging species into galactic society. No longer would they be required to submit and wait centuries for acceptance. Instead, they would be evaluated on their merits, their capabilities, and their willingness to cooperate. The age of absolute Dominion authority was over. A new era of collaborative governance had begun. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Senator Krell and his faction argued that the Dominion had surrendered its principles, that recognizing humanity as equals would lead to chaos. But their voices were outnumbered by those who had fought in the war, who had seen what cooperation could achieve. Ambassador Kelvin Shaw became humanity's first permanent representative to the Galactic Council. In his inaugural address, he spoke of his species' journey from a single blue world to the stars, of their struggles and their triumphs, and of their hopes for the future. He acknowledged that humanity had much to learn from the Dominion's ancient wisdom, but also suggested that perhaps the Dominion could learn from humanity's relentless drive to improve, to question, to never accept that things must remain as they have always been. Trade agreements followed diplomatic recognition. Human technology, particularly in the fields of weapons development and artificial intelligence, proved valuable to Dominion species. In exchange, humanity gained access to advanced medical treatments, terraforming techniques, and hyperspace navigation systems that had been refined over millennia. Both sides prospered from the exchange. Joint research stations were established at the border between human and Dominion space. Dr. Evelyn Park led a combined team of human and Tees-Howe scientists working on next-generation propulsion systems. Former enemies now collaborated, sharing knowledge that benefited both civilizations. The psychological warfare technology that had proven so effective against the corruption was adapted for peaceful purposes. Medical treatments for mental disorders, enhanced communication systems, and educational tools. Cultural exchanges became common. Human artists performed on Dominion worlds, sharing music, literature, and art forms that other species found fascinating. Dominion scholars visited Earth, studying human history and philosophy. Young humans attended Dominion universities, learning sciences and arts that had been perfected over thousands of years. Young Dominion citizens studied in human institutions, experiencing educational systems that encouraged questioning and innovation rather than rote memorization of established knowledge. The greatest symbol of the new alliance was the construction of Unity Station, a massive orbital facility built jointly by human and Dominion engineers. Located at the exact midpoint between Earth and Archanus Prime, it served as a hub for trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Its construction employed workers from dozens of species, all collaborating on a project that would have been impossible just years before. But beneath the cooperation, tensions remained. Some Dominion species resented humanity's rapid rise to prominence. Some humans distrusted their former enemies, remembering Proxima Centauri and the thousands who had died. Both sides maintained their military capabilities, neither willing to fully lower their guard. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, now promoted to general, commanded the Joint Defense Force responsible for protecting the border regions. Her forces included both human and Dominion units, working together to patrol the frontier and respond to threats. It was not always smooth. Different command structures, different tactics, and different cultures led to conflicts that required constant mediation. But slowly, grudgingly, the two sides learned to trust each other. 20 years after the Treaty of Concordance, High Arbiter Zephon prepared to retire. His 4 centuries of service were coming to an end, and the Galactic Council would need to elect a successor. In a surprising move, he nominated Ambassador Kelvin Shaw for the position. The nomination sparked fierce debate. A human leading the Galactic Council. It was unprecedented. Shaw himself was reluctant, aware that his election might seem like human imperialism in a different guise. But Zephon argued that humanity's perspective was exactly what the galaxy needed. They brought fresh eyes to problems that the Dominion had struggled with for millennia. They questioned assumptions, challenged traditions, and pushed for constant improvement. The vote was close, but Shaw was elected. In his acceptance speech, he promised to serve not as a human representing humanity's interests, but as an advocate for all species. He spoke of the lessons his people had learned. That strength came not from dominance but from cooperation, that progress required the willingness to change, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to build it together. On Earth, President Laurent, now in his final term, reflected on humanity's journey. They had crossed into the Dominion and never hesitated. They had refused to bow, refused to submit, refused to accept that their destiny should be determined by others. That defiance had brought them to the brink of war, but it had also earned them respect, recognition, and ultimately, partnership. The human colony at Proxima Centauri was rebuilt, not as a Dominion territory, but as a symbol of renewal. A memorial stood in the capital city, listing the names of every human who had died defending the system. Among them was Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes, whose sacrifice had inspired a generation. Her words were engraved at the memorial's base. "I regret that I have but one ship to give for my species." Young humans visiting the memorial asked their parents about the war, about the fight for independence, about what it meant to never hesitate. The answers varied, but they all contained the same core truth. Humanity had survived because they refused to accept anyone else's definition of who they should be. They had thrived because they never stopped pushing forward, never stopped innovating, never stopped fighting for their right to exist on their own terms. Admiral Helena Drake, now retired but still influential in military circles, gave a speech at the Naval Academy on Mars. She spoke to the cadets about the price of freedom, the responsibility that came with power, and the importance of never forgetting where they came from. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through submission but through determination. That legacy must be preserved. In the Dominion, the changes continued. Inspired by humanity's example, other species began questioning long-held traditions. The rigid hierarchies that had governed galactic society for millennia began to loosen. Innovation increased. New technologies emerged. The pace of progress, stagnant for centuries, accelerated. Not all changes were positive, and not everyone welcomed them, but the galaxy was transforming. War Marshal Tethys, now serving as military advisor to the Galactic Council, worked closely with humanity's defense forces. The old warrior who had once sought to destroy humanity now collaborated with them on joint military exercises, strategic planning, and defensive preparations. When asked about this transformation, he simply said that true warriors recognized strength when they encountered it. Humanity had proven their strength and earned his respect. The galaxy entered a new golden age. Trade flourished. Scientific advancement accelerated. Art and culture from hundreds of species enriched civilizations across thousands of worlds. And at the heart of it all was the partnership between humanity and the Dominion, two civilizations that had nearly destroyed each other but instead chose to build something greater together. New threats would emerge. Challenges would arise. Conflicts would erupt. But the foundation had been laid. Humanity had crossed into the Dominion and never hesitated. They had fought for their freedom, earned their place, and transformed the galaxy in the process. Their legacy was not conquest or domination, but the simple truth that freedom, once truly won, could never be taken away. As Ambassador Kelvin Shaw stood before the Galactic Council on his first day as High Arbiter, he looked out at representatives from 300 species. Some were skeptical. Others were hopeful. All were watching to see what humanity would do with the power they had earned. Shaw smiled, remembering Commander Jacob Pierce's words from that first encounter so many years ago. Humanity would welcome diplomatic relations, respect existing territories, and cooperate when possible. But they would not stop moving forward. That spirit of relentless progress, of refusing to accept limits, of never hesitating in the face of impossible odds, had brought humanity from a single planet to the leadership of galactic civilization. And that same spirit would carry them into whatever future awaited, together with allies who had learned that sometimes the greatest strength came not from maintaining order, but from embracing change.